New Orleans Saints wide receiver Rashid Shaheed is in line for a major step forward in 2024. We got all that and a little bit of land yap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints, as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at three players that can have major X-Factor-like, game-changing-like impact for the New Orleans Saints in 2024. We're going to take a look at the tight end position and discuss how someone needs to emerge in exactly this category from that position group. We'll take a look at all the options there. We're going to focus in on Kendre Miller when it comes to the running back room, who's looking to build off of an impressive showing to close out the 2023 season. And we're going to kick everything off today with wide receiver Kendre Miller, who now is the bona fide, no questions asked, New Orleans Saints wide receiver 2, and because of that, he could be in line for a monster year in 2024. We got all that and much more for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much making us your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed over at Game Time. New Orleans Saints wide receiver Rashid Shaheed going into his third season, coming off of an all-pro year, coming off of a Pro Bowl year as a returner. But in 2024, he is set to have an even larger impact than being an all-pro player, than being a Pro Bowl player as a special teamer, because of what he's going to be able to do as the team's solidified number 2, the wide receiver 2 behind only Chris Olave on this roster. Rashid Shaheed is in for a big-time focus, a lot of opportunity, and therefore a lot of production in 2024. I want to break down the whys and the hows behind how and why it is that Rashid Shaheed can have this humongous breakout season here in 2024. Now, he had a really solid season in 2023. Over 700 receiving yards, consistently finding the end zone, the big play factory, big play machine. The only thing was that when it came to his scoring potential, it really came down to a lot of home run balls. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Rashid Shaheed thrives as a receiver in an area where Derek Carr excels as a quarterback, which is in the downfield passing game. Derek Carr, one of the most accurate quarterbacks last year in throwing the deep pass, 20 or more yards downfield. And Rashid Shaheed, one of the receivers that ran the route the most in terms of percentage of route share when it comes to all of the different routes that he ran and consistently targeted in those downfield areas as well. Now that he's moving into this season as the number 2 receiver, he's going to have to impact the field in other areas, but he's got that in him as well. I don't know if you caught Adam and Ryan over at Saints Block Party, the podcast, fantastic show. I definitely recommend you check out, but they had a guest on. We talked a little bit about Derek Carr's game from a very non-biased, analytical, objective fashion. And what we saw in terms of that research kind of reiterate some of the things we spoke about all throughout the season last year, and that we saw with the Pete Carmichael offense with Jameis Winston year before that, where everything was either 80 yards downfield, not really, but everything was either 20 plus yards downfield, or it was a check down in the 0 to 10 yard range. And their guest and they had a fantastic, and I highly recommend going and listening to the conversation, because it is an enlightening conversation around how it is that this New Orleans Saints offense has operated over the course of the past couple of years. It's through the lens of Derek Carr's 2023, but we had a lot of the same conversations about Jameis Winston the year before that, and Trevor Siemian and the other 27 quarterbacks that started for the Saints during that season. So the other thing that is worth mentioning is that the other place where Carr does excel and where this offense asked him to produce a lot in 2023 was in the short area of the field. Rashid Shaheed can have an impact there, and perhaps that's an impact that the New Orleans Saints would love to see him have even more, not necessarily in the check down situations, which is where a lot of that short area work happened, but instead hitting receivers in stride, the designed quick passing game, something that quarterback coach Andrew Janocko believes in very strongly, has led a bunch of different coaching clinics on already, and something that Clint Kubiak, New Orleans Saints' new offensive coordinator, has spoken about reintroducing to the New Orleans Saints game. One of the reasons why the Saints don't get a ton of yards after catch is because a lot of the times that you're hit or that you see those receivers hit in areas where yards after catch would typically be a big part of the game, 0 to 10 yards downfield, they've stopped. They've come back on a hitch. They've come back on a comeback. They found the open spot and sat down, all those other things. It's not like the Drew Brees days, or it hasn't been like the Drew Brees days, the Sean Payton days as of late, where these players are hit in stride and therefore able to continue with their momentum and pick up yards after catch. This is one of the reasons why you haven't seen a lot of yak yards after catch yards for the New Orleans Saints. But if Rashid Shaheed gets more of those opportunities in addition to his downfield impactful opportunities, and of course, introducing a little bit more of the intermediate attacking the middle of the field, something that the Saints did not do a good job of last year, but have looked to put an emphasis on during OTAs and minicamp so far, this is where Rashid Shaheed's game goes to the next level. Not to mention, you add in motion, you add in play action, all of these other pieces, and then all of a sudden, you have some of the things that go into your offense that are designed to amplify the downfield attack, like play action, run the play action, look deep, see if Rashid Shaheed's out there, screw it, Shaheed's down there somewhere. And then, of course, motion when you have a player that is one of the fastest players on your roster, like a Rashid Shaheed, if not the fastest player on your roster, then utilizing the motion gives him the opportunity to be able to get moving with more momentum or create other opportunities that end up benefiting Rashid Shaheed, i.e. game planning areas where you're trying to open up different areas of the field where you can attack with him. Part of this, of course, has to be a clear focus in keeping him involved. That has been one of those things that the Saints have struggled with over the course of the past couple of years, is keeping playmakers involved on a consistent basis. So that's something that the team will need to be able to do. What Rashid Shaheed will need to be able to improve, and I've said it before, you best respect Rashid Shaheed's gangsta. One of the things that you would love to see from him is just an opportunity, and some of this comes down to how the team is utilizing him, but taking advantage of the opportunities to show that he is indeed a yards after catch threat. Him being able to use that returner ability, that all-pro, Pro Bowl level returner ability on offense with the ball in his hands by getting the ball in space. Now, it's on the team to get him the ball in space. It's on him to maximize those opportunities. We did see flashes of that all throughout the season last year. Lots of big catch and run opportunities for Rashid Shaheed when the offense kind of got a little bit more oiled, got a little bit more in rhythm, all these other things. Now, the other piece is that for Clint Kubiak, I think he should be creative in Rashid Shaheed's deployment. Have him run routes out of the backfield. Utilize him in a Deebo Samuel-like fashion in terms of his deployment. All the different places where you can line him up, all the different places where he can take snaps. He's not Deebo Samuel. He's not a Deebo Samuel style player in terms of bulk, in terms of play style, in terms of size, in terms of physicality, all those other things. But that doesn't mean that you can't deploy him from all of the different creative places where you have deployed a Deebo Samuel. If the New Orleans Saints, Clint Kubiak, and in some cases Rashid Shaheed, along with Derek Carr, get all of these things right, Rashid Shaheed is in line for a monster 2024 season to help complement Chris Olave's monster 2024 season as well. Last note that I'll mention on this, the departure of Michael Thomas opens up greater opportunities, and more 2 tight end sets, more 2 running back sets means fewer 3 wide receiver sets on the field. That should also bolster those passing or those receiving opportunities for Rashid Shaheed in those situations wherein the New Orleans Saints are still going out heavy, but still looking to pass. So with the change of philosophy for the New Orleans Saints, there's a bit of a change of fortune for Rashid Shaheed as well. That same change of philosophy should go to benefit second-year running back Kendre Miller, who's looking to build off of the momentum that he started to put together in the very last game of the 2023 season. Let's discuss how he can get it done as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go to pick up last minute tickets. You've got a lot of users out there that save up to 60% sometimes by buying their last minute tickets through Game Time. I do this all the time. When I'm out of town, when I'm visiting somewhere, when I want to take in an event. And it doesn't even have to be sports. It could be comedy. It could be music, like a concert. It can be theater. There's a ton that you can get in on over at Game Time. It's one of the reasons why I love it so much. And for me, as a spontaneous guy, not so much a planner, especially when it comes to evenings out and stuff like that, Game Time comes in clutch when necessary and when needed as well. So take all the guesswork out of buying your tickets today by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first order. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Boy, I forgot how to spell there for a second. For $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. Second-year running back Kendre Miller is going to be looked at as the future of the New Orleans Saints run game, or at least first in line to be a part of that future. So 2024 is going to be really, really important for him, and he's got everything that it takes to take advantage of that opportunity. We got that coming up for you here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 stream. You can be found on YouTube on the Locked On Sports Today page that is programmed to give you all the biggest stories from around the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, all around the world of sports from the local experts that know the teams the best. Lots of big NBA news going down right now. Donovan Mitchell getting his extension over in Cleveland. Are the Pelicans trading for Lauri Markkanen? There's so much going on around the NBA. It's a great way to keep up while you're doing your work, cleaning your house, all that other stuff. Just cut on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. And you could also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So second-year running back Kendre Miller's got a really, really nice opportunity ahead of him here in 2024. Not only with just going into his second year, hopefully being able to stay a little healthier than he was during his rookie season and all that, but you saw some of the potential that he had, the momentum that he built at the end of 2023, now trying to carry that over to 2024. So you've got the talent, you've got the momentum. Now, what's the other thing we always look for when it comes to the breakout candidates? Opportunity. And that opportunity should be there. A Kubiak offense, going back to the Gary Kubiak days, believes very much in running back by committee. So even though Alvin Kamara is set to be the number one guy, which, by the way, let me clarify one thing I said yesterday. Alvin Kamara is around 200 rushing yards behind Deuce McAllister for number 2 on the all-time franchise rushing yards list. I think I accidentally said that he's within or right around 200 yards of Mark Ingram for the number 1 spot. No, he's within 200 yards or just above for the second spot. For the number 1 spot, though, it's about 670-ish yards, and so still well within his grasp to take over the rushing yards crown while extending his all-time touchdowns, total touchdowns crown, and his all-time rushing touchdowns crown, which he already owns as well. So just wanted to clarify that. But even if Alvin Kamara is the lead guy, the number 1 guy, Kendre Miller, Jamal Williams are still going to get a lot of looks. And if Jordan Mims is on the active roster, if James Robinson is on the active roster, if you look at the way that the Kubiak offenses have worked in the past, you're seeing a very successful run game, and you see a true committee. I think maybe Arian Foster might be the kind of exception to that. But if you're looking at the Gary Kubiak offensive coordinator days, not the head coaching days, then you're looking at things probably a little bit differently. It's very committee heavy. And then you look at what works in San Francisco. What even before Christian McCaffrey, that run game was really, really good. The Jerick McKinnons of the world, the Jeff Wilsons of the world, the Raheem Mosterts of the world, the who's the kid from Louisiana? Somebody will have to tell me, but all that. Then you look over at Miami, same thing, running back by committee. That's the way that they made it work when Mike McDaniel went over from San Francisco to Miami. I think you're going to see something similar for the New Orleans Saints going here into 2024 with Clint Kubiak coming from effectively the same type of position that you saw Mike McDaniel come from. Bobby Slowick over in Houston came from the same position that that was Dameon Pierce and others. And then, over in Houston last year. And so we're seeing where this can go. So I think that this is going to be a real opportunity for Kendre Miller to have that kind of game-breaking X factor type of impact. He might not impact games on weeks 1 through 18, but he might impact week 1, week 4, week 6, week 8, 9. You know what I mean? Like that kind of spread out constant impact, because those other games are going to be impacted by Alvin Kamara. Other games are going to be impacted by Chris Olave. Others are going to be impacted by Rashid Shaheed, all that kind of stuff. So let me give you just a little bit of a rundown here on some of the things that I think are really important for Kendre Miller. So there's the great production to end 2023. His ability to be able to pull that over here into 2024 is going to be big. That was where we talked about with momentum. One of the big things that he's got to learn a little bit more about is the wide zone rushing game. Now, he looked really comfortable in it when it came to OTAs, minicamp, stuff like that. But during his time over at TCU, while he was a heavy zone runner, he was a heavy inside zone runner, not necessarily a heavy outside zone runner. That's not his fault. That's just what the deployment of the offense was, right? That's just what the offense looked like for the TCU Horned Frogs. And so for Kendre, it's just going to be about feeling comfortable with the outside zone run. The thing about it is that he has the vision, he has the breakaway speed, he's a good decision maker, and he makes his decisions quickly. And so with vision, with decision making, and with the breakaway speed, all of this stuff and the athleticism, agility, all the other things that kind of go into it, that all fits. So he has all of the little building blocks that you need to be a good outside zone runner. Now he just needs to gather the experience. So training camp's going to be really important for him there. I mentioned that the committee usage is typical of a Kubiak offense. This is a pretty wild stat, thanks to Scott Barnett, who does some really, really wonderful stuff over at like Fantasy Pros and all that. Gary Kubiak, during his time as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, we're talking about 13 years as an offensive coordinator. Here's the amount of times he had a top 12 rushing offense as an offensive coordinator. You ready for this? Out of 13? The answer is 13. Every freaking one of them. Top 12 is not impressive to you. That's okay. I completely understand. Let's look at the number of those 13 that were top 5. 10. All but 3. Pretty good. Pretty stinking good. And so if you're Clint Kubiak trying to take your dad's system and bring it somewhere and say, okay, what are the things that I have to do in order to make that work? That's a type of success that you're pulling building blocks from. That's the type of success that you're pulling DNA from, that you're pulling pillars of belief from, tenets of your offense. There we go. Tenets is the word I was looking for. That's what you're trying to pull from. So yeah, pretty good system to pull from. And pretty good system for a guy like Kendre Miller to be in. One of the reasons why I mentioned not only does he have the talent, which we already know, not only does he have the building blocks necessary to excel as a zone runner, not only does he have the momentum, not just from the very last game of the season, but he had some impressive games to close out the season, or impressive moments to close out the season, but in particular finish the season on a really, really high note. But he's also going to have the opportunity because Clint Kubiak is bringing in the tenets of this wildly successful Gary Kubiak and repeatedly successful Gary Kubiak rushing attack, mixed with some of the things that he picked up from Kyle Shanahan, which we've already seen work out by going to other places, like Mike McDaniel going to Miami, like Bobby Slowick going to Houston. It's all there. It's all there. The momentum, the talent, the opportunity. It's all there for Kendre Miller. So really, really exciting. Really, really excited to see him in training camp out in California, especially after kind of diving into some of this research. And Scott Barrett did some really, really good stuff that was really helpful in all of this as well. So make sure you go and check him out. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at the tight end room, because the tight end room needs an X factor. They need a game breaker, but the big question is, who is it going to be? We're going to break down all the options here as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints need somebody to step up when it comes to that tight end room. They have the talent, but who will it be? Let's break down all the options and take a look at where this tight end room stands when it comes to this conversation, even if they have to be without Juwan Johnson for at least a hot minute. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here for another episode of Locked On Saints. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Coming up tomorrow, who are the game changers on the defensive side of the football? I'm going to tell you why Jonathan Abram is super, super important to the New Orleans Saints defensive success in 2024, as well as a couple of other players that will have some big time impact. And sound off for me. Who do you think are some of the biggest game changers? You can name the big names, or you can name the unexpected game changers, either one, over on the defensive side and over on the offensive side. We're looking at some of the offensive guys today. We'll get to some of the defensive guys tomorrow, but I want to hear some of your thoughts on this as well. So look, the New Orleans Saints absolutely need somebody to step up when it comes to the tight end room. And I'm not saying that because it feels unlikely that they will. And it's like, oh, they need to find somebody to step up. It's not that. I'm just saying that that they'll have to figure out who that person is. You like that? Took it back to my theater roots there for a moment. Drama, drama, drama. So when I look at where the New Orleans Saints tight end room is right now, obviously one of the biggest question marks is around the health of Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson had a really impressive close to the 2022 season that he didn't necessarily get the opportunity to bridge over into 2023, injuries, things like that. Then he had a strong close at the end of 2023, picking up the majority of his receiving yards on the year in the last 4 games. 3 of his 4 receiving touchdowns came in the last 4 games. It was like, okay, there you go. There it is. Maybe we were just kind of a year early on the expectation there. And now he moves into Doug Mouton, and I literally talked about that over at WWL TV not too long ago. And so can you bring him over to 2024 and keep that momentum going? And things were looking good. And then all of a sudden it was like his foot hurt. Then he needed surgery. And then boom, now there goes the question marks, not around Juwan Johnson, but just the question marks between, does that throw a wrench in his ability to be able to bridge the gap? Injuries can be tricky in that way. They can stifle a little bit of that ability to bring something over from one season to the other. It's like hitting a hard reset sometimes. So will that happen? Or can Juwan Johnson still bridge the gap and bring in some of that momentum? So that's going to be one of the biggest question marks for the New Orleans Saints. And then the question mark behind that is, what if he can't? Right? Like, what if this is too much of a hindrance? Where do you go after that? Or what if he's not ready to go at the beginning of the season? Where do you go after that? So the obvious answer and the obvious name that sticks around here, even though he's not technically a tight end by trait or by position designation, is Taysom Hill. But we know that Taysom Hill is like the ultimate X factor. He impacts all 3 positions that we've talked about today: wide receiver, running back, and tight end, and quarterback, right? Guy who was outstanding running even, the power runs, the RPOs, the everything that he can do. Yeah, he's the ultimate X factor. He is the legitimate X factor. In fact, we should change it from the X factor to the T factor or the Tay factor in honor of Taysom Hill. Every player that we talk about that can have this impact out of nowhere from somewhere you didn't expect them to, or from too many different places to count or whatever. Anytime that we talk about those players where we typically use the phrase X factor, we should now be calling it the Tay factor. Everyone's a Tay factor now. So we know that, but where do you go beyond that? Because he's going to be needed elsewhere. They still want him to take snaps at quarterback for those quarterback power moments, those quarterback sweep moments, those RPO moments, and to throw the football. Like, they're still okay with him doing all those things. They're going to use him out of the backfield in 2024. Because why shouldn't you? They're going to use him at fullback. They're going to use him out wide. They're going to use him in the slot. Like, why not? So you have to have somebody else that's able to step up. And that's where guys like Foster Moreau, as well as Dallin Holker, undrafted free agent tight end coming out of Colorado State, really come into the conversation here as guys that can be those X factors, those unexpected game breakers to help you out. How do they do that? Well, obviously, they're going to have to play a role in the run game, especially with the outside zone run. You want to expand your blocking patterns as far east-west as you can. You want to expand those blocking patterns as close to the boundary as you can with the wide receivers on the outside as well. So obviously, they're going to have an impact there, but you're also going to need those seam threats. One of the things that I like about the way that a tight end could potentially really, really have a strong impact for the New Orleans Saints in this new offense and moving forward is that you've got your boundary threats. Who's your middle of the field seam threat? that's where Juwan Johnson feels like he would have fit in perfectly. I keep thinking back to the Week 17 Tampa Bay Buccaneers game where he goes off the field for a little while, comes back on, and then the very first play that he's back on makes this huge catch down the left seam where he's got to go outstretch, catch it, and he kind of does like a somersault and sticks the landing, pops up, and then keeps going, even after the injury and all that. And that seam attack was such one of those things that you were looking at and you going, oh, I really want to bridge that over to 2024 with this new offense because I think that that's a really good fit for what it is that New Orleans Saints need to be able to best complement the guys that they have on the boundaries in Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Now, Juwan Johnson is not going to be the only option to do that. Foster Moreau can do that. Dallin Holker has been doing that all throughout minicamps, OTAs, all that. So I'm not going to pinpoint a specific X factor. I guess the biggest X factor, or Tay factor, if you will, to come from this conversation is going to be Dallin Holker because he's the undrafted free agent rookie, right? He's the one that people aren't going to expect to have that impact. And that's part of being the X factor or Tay factor, is that it's not expected that you'll be that player. So it makes sense to pinpoint Dallin Holker as that guy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Dallin Holker. It could be Foster Moreau. And in a way, it could still be Juwan Johnson. Because remember, Juwan Johnson's not expected to miss the full season here. He's just expected to miss some time this offseason. I've been given optimistic timelines that would put him back at some point during training camp. I just think those are optimistic timelines. Optimistic. And so maybe pinpointing him being on a pitch count week 1, not so risky, right? Or at least being slow out the gate to start the season as he reacclimates, reconditions, all of these other things, and probably has to catch up a little bit on the playbook from a physical reps standpoint, not from a home study standpoint and all those other things. So, I think it could be Juwan Johnson. It could be Foster Moreau. It could be Dallin Holker. It could be Michael Jacobson, for all we know. It just has to be somebody from this position group. The coaching is too good. The scheme is going to be too good and is going to be built for a tight end to have an impact. Somebody here has to be able to say, that's my opportunity. And I'm excited to see who it's going to be. And I think we'll start getting some glimpses of that in training camp. But really, it'll be the regular season, I think, where that story ends up being told. All right, y'all, make sure you come back tomorrow. We're going to take a look at the defensive guys. Don't forget, let me know, who are your game breakers, your Tay factors that aren't named Taysom Hill. But otherwise, you can go big name, small name, whatever, over on the offensive side and over on the defensive side. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day, every day here. Make sure you go and check out Locked on Pelicans with Jake Madison. I keep telling you, he's on fire, and it keeps happening day after day after day. So go and check out Jake Madison, Locked on Pelicans. Check out Matt Moscona, who's been doing awesome being back over at Locked on LSU as well. We appreciate you very much. As always, make it Locked on Saints a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you. LOCKEDON NFL. Boy, I forgot how to spell there for a second.